I run a couple of jam nights around the local area, and there was one lad there, a great guitar player, saying, how do I get gigs? What do I need to do? How does it all work? And then we had a chat about it, and then I thought, actually, I can make a bit of a film about this because it might help. Now, I did my first gig when I was 15, so that was 30 years ago, so I've been gigging 2/3 of my life, goodness me. Now, I know there's obviously lots of other people out there who have been gigging longer, or maybe done more gigs, and it's not a competition, of course, but I feel that I'm able to put my 2 bob in. Now, I've done all sorts of gigs, from people's weddings where you're not only going to play, but you're also invited as a guest. So you sit there at the table, you've got a name badge and you're with the guests, and your starter arrives and then your lobster arrives and it's all free drink and there's somewhere for you to stay that they've prepared and there's somewhere to get changed and all of that. So you're looked after to within an inch of your life. Great. I'll talk about the drink thing in a minute. At the other end of the scale, I've done gigs where I did one where the bride's family and the groom's family started a massive fight. Everyone went outside and the only two left were the bride and the bride's mother, who were crying on each other's shoulders while we were playing We Are Family, which was our sort of sick joke that nobody else seemed to get. So that was fine. The police vans arrived, took them off. That's fine. Now, of course, that was towards the beginning of my gigging career. So you've got to try and avoid those gigs. Now, my brother, who ran an agency, when we were first gigging together, he said cheap and nasty manky gigs and dangerous gigs is just going to lead to more of the same. And he's absolutely right. But then you think, well, yes, that's just common sense talking. So how do you get out of the, if you're doing gigs where you think, oh, it's horrendous, how do you get out of it? Well, in this day and age, it's much, much easier to sell yourself than it was in the past. You've got social media, YouTube, you're watching this on Facebook, Instagram, etc. But musicians aren't always the best at selling themselves, and myself included. I'm only really getting to the point where I'm sort of understanding how to sell my services, how to sell my music. So it is tricky, and even with social media and all the platforms that exist for you to promote your music, there are more and more acts out there. So the competition is just as rife and just as hard as it's always been. And if you live in a big city, for example, it gets harder and harder. If you're in London, sometimes it's pay to play, which I just can't stand. The fact that you've been learning your craft for years and then you have to pay to play in a club that may give you another gig. Or pubs that say, bring people with you. That's just ridiculous. I've never heard anything so daft. You think, well, okay, well, what do you want? A coach load or a transit van load or what? Now, pubs. The problem with pub gigs, and I do pub gigs, and I used to do a lot of pub gigs. I don't do so many now, but I pick and choose the pubs that I want to play in, and I actually have a very nice time doing that. It becomes a sort of a night out. I've got children, I've got young children, so sometimes actually being paid to do a pub gig and actually going out is pretty, it's pretty good, really. But pubs, as we all know, don't make very much money on beer at all. They make money on wine, they make money on soft drinks. They might, if they do food and they're good at it, they'll make a bit of money from food as well, but it's a very, very hard existence. And there are some, pub landlords out there, pub landlords, landladies, who are really good at it because they just throw their entire life into it and end up having something nice, and they're social people, that sort of thing. And then you get the fly-by-night ones who just want to try and promote the pub and drinks promotions, all that sort of thing. And when you're playing in front of people who are 3 sheets to the wind, it becomes a problem if you're not really on it. Now that goes for the musicians as well. I mentioned just now about drinking. When I was younger, much younger and stupid, I did a gig for somebody, and it was a very well-paid gig, and it was a big crowd there, and we thought, right, let's record it. And we would set up all the recording equipment, So it's multi-track recording, we've got to mix it and do a proper demo. This was before YouTube, so it was going to be audio only. And it was free drinks. And a slab of lagers just got thrown onto the stage. I went, here we go. And we all had quite a lot to drink. And I remember standing there playing guitar, my eyes closed, and I was a 16th note behind everybody else. And I realised it at the time. I couldn't catch up. Just couldn't catch up. And I was a bit worse for wear the next morning. I listened back to the recording, and I sobered up very quickly, and I was disgusted. I was mortified. And I just thought, oh no. And I listened to half a minute's worth and just formatted the hard drive. Just got rid of it. And it was hideous. And it's a very good lesson. It was a valuable lesson to learn that actually booze and music don't mix. Fair enough, if you have somebody offers you a pint or something, oh, how lovely, while he's setting up, that's fine. But of course you've got to drive as well. But when at this particular gig we were given rooms, and it was quite a high fee, it made me stop and think about how I needed to conduct myself. Now I've got also another story about the approach that you take to a client, and it could be a client that's where you're playing and it's a really expensive wedding, or it could be a tiny little pub where you're dealing with the bar owner. They should be treated exactly the same. If the gig isn't worth much, it doesn't matter. You still behave in the same way as you would for an expensive function. That's how to do it. If you're arrogant or there's any silliness, it's just hard. It just makes it hard for everyone, including the band. Now, when I was 22, I worked at the Townhouse Studio in London on Goldhawk Road, and I was very lucky to work there. I was a technical engineer, an electronics engineer, and one day I was called to Studio 1 of the tape machines had stopped working, or there was some problem, it wasn't syncing up with the other machine, or there was a problem with the mixing desk or something. I don't remember the exact fault, and I'm not surprised I don't remember the fault, because when I went into the studio there was B.B.King sat on the sofa, and they were doing Riding with the King, him and Eric Clapton, and they were doing overdubs and sort of edits and that sort of thing. And of course I was starstruck. I love blues and B.B.King. We had records in the house when I was young, and I was good, fumbling like some idiot. Good morning, sir. I hope to have this fixed very soon for you. And then when it was clear that actually the fault was going to take a little bit longer, I thought, I've just got to throw caution to the wind. I was saying, I'm really sorry. This is going to take a little bit longer. Really sorry about this. And there are so many artists out there, so many musicians, so many people in high places like B.B.King who would just lose the plot. It would all be stompy abouty stuff and anger and suing the studio. It was £2,500 a day, this studio as well, so it was a lot of dosh back in 1996, about 7, that sort of time. And the opposite was the case with B.B.King. He went off, he said, would you like a cup of tea? And I thought, the king of the blues, who I've idolised my entire life, has just offered me a cup of tea. That's a pretty surreal experience, to which I, of course, replied, oh, that would be lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. King. And so off he went, came out tea and biscuits. And then the fault was fixed and went back downstairs to the workshop, and that was the last of that. And that's the only time, that's my only encounter with an artist of that calibre and of that level of humility. Humility, that's the word. If you look in the Oxford Dictionary under humility, it says see B.B.King, in my world at least. And from that moment on, that encounter has never ever left me. I will never forget it. And it made such a difference to me as somebody who was doing something for somebody else. It made me feel he made me feel like the most important person in the room, which I suppose technically I was, given there was a fault and I was the one who was going to fix it. But he made me feel really, really important. And it was great. It was so, and Not many words were said, it was just his manner. So I've tried to keep that with me. You know, I'm not comparing myself to B.B.King. I'm not going to do this high and mighty sort of moral high ground stuff. But when I deal with a client, it's got to be a total service. It's got to be a professional service. So when you're in a pub or when you're in elsewhere, it's got to be a pro service, and you've got to be impeccable in your manner, because it will rub off, it will reward you. Now, to a certain extent, people think, well, I've earned the stripes, I've done my gigs in the pubs and nothing's happening, I'm not getting any gigs out of it. Well, there we go, you see. It's back to my brother's point. If you do pub gigs, it's highly unlikely that you would get good paying gigs. You might pick up a birthday party or two, or maybe a sort of a cheaper wedding, maybe. That's fine, and if, you know, that's okay. But I make my living doing this. So it's a bit different, because obviously with pub gigs, you're also playing alongside bands who have day jobs. It doesn't mean they're bad bands, but it just means that you're having to compete with somebody who doesn't really need the work but likes doing it. And there's the rub, you see. If you're a pro and you hate doing it, or you look like you're hating it, they're just going to hire the people who like doing it, because they bring, you know, a positive vibe to a pub. Now, the secret, of course, with that is to do other things. You can do some recording for people. You can go and play gigs. You can do other gigs. You can do a mate of mine does a lot of busking, and he drives quite a fair way. But he gets some really nice gigs through busking. So you pick and choose your towns and your places, and you play material that is, you know, all-encompassing and will appeal to all. So, and engaging in more than one genre is really important. Now, of course, this is all covers bands, covers gig stuff. If you have an originals band, it's hard work, really hard work to try and make your records sell. I'm really lucky. For almost 10 years, I did a lot of touring in Japan, did lots of gigs in Europe, some really nice festivals, and was treated like royalty. And, you know, it's lovely. I don't do it anymore, partly through circumstance. I've got a young family. So, but I look back fondly on those experiences without any regret, or, oh, I wish I was still doing that. Because actually it's a nice trip down memory lane, if I'm brutally honest, because it was very, very tiring doing all that stuff. But you make ends meet by doing things that you enjoy doing. And that, the enjoyment of playing music is sometimes capitalised, sometimes used by pubs or other people saying, well, you do what you love, so that means you can do it for nothing. Or very often musicians are asked to do charity gigs, and because it will be good for exposure. Now, if somebody says that to you, the stock line that you should use is, well, the bloke who's bought the Portaloos to the festival, is he doing it for nothing? Or is the bar doing it for nothing? Or is somebody else doing it for nothing? Which, of course, they won't. There's always going to be money involved. But for some reason, the musicians are always asked to play for nothing. If you do gigs for free, it is absolutely on you. It has to be on your terms entirely. You have to offer it rather than agree to it. You have to say, I'm going to do this for nothing because I really like the charity involved. And you get, and it's just, and then that's fine. You commit. On the subject of fees, now pubs have a ceiling value for amount they will pay for a band, because they don't make much money on beer, as I've just discussed. You know, it's a hard existence, so there's always going to be a ceiling value. If you try to, can we have a pay rise, their overheads will go up. Their overheads are always increasing. So if you ask for a pay rise, really, it's highly likely that a pub will say, look, I'm really sorry, we can't afford it, and you lose the gig and they give it to somebody else. And that's a double-edged sword. You could think, well, okay, all right, yeah, we know we're not going to make it, so perhaps it's one door closes and a couple open. Now, on the subject of fees, if you agree to a gig for a fee, now I've been in this position where I've done gigs with people who have been sort of tied up with agencies, and and it's always this commission and extra money for the PA and all this. It's a horrible situation to be in, and actually it's completely needless because, well, twofold really. For start, the promoter or the person who's doing the agency, they're getting you the gig. You sit by the phone, it rings, you pick it up and go, yes, I'm free on that day, the fee is X. You haven't had to do anything. Of course, the problem comes if it's a band where you pay a commission every time because it's a rolling thing. That's a different ballgame. But if you agree to a fee, if somebody says it's 100 quid each, you go, oh, great, it's in the diary. That's the end of it. And that, you know, and I don't regret making a sort of stern face at that. That's the end of it. If it's 100 quid, it's 100 quid. You can't go to the gig and then find out that somebody's getting commission for it. So, you've agreed to the money. And you agree to the money and you turn up with the grace that B.B.King had when he gave me my cup of tea. So, there we are. Now, when you go to a pub, let's say you're looking for gigs, even with the prevalence of social media, where it's easy now to just click on a phone or you click on and look at a link, your best bet is to have your videos queued up on an iPad or a phone or a tablet or whatever it is. You go with a piece of equipment that says, this is the band, and you press play in front of them. Because they haven't got time to go look at the computer and, oh, we'll get back to you. What you want is to put the ball absolutely in their court for the gig, not the ball in their court to check you out to see who you are. Because a pub that you go into cold might not know who you are. There are some pubs I've done where, and I'm not speaking out of turn or I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but pubs going, oh great, oh brilliant, because they've heard me in another, my local reputation, for example. And that's lovely, that's really nice. It's really nice to have a pub that has kind of been waiting for you to ask. That's very nice. And, you don't rest on your laurels. You're still a professional, offering a service. And you're only as good as your last gig. And that's a very important thing as well, to always upgrade your set. If you put one tune in a week or one tune in every gig, which, let's face it, isn't overly tricky, could be a really simple song that somebody might know the words and you just put the chords to it. Before too long, you've got a complete set without having to rehearse necessarily. You just put that one tune in at a gig and you see how it goes. You learn lessons from it, you practice it a bit, and then you go practice it on your own at home, go and do it again at the next gig, but with a second new tune as well. And that's great. And that means that you can constantly refresh your set. You can even make an act out of this. Now, if somebody in the pub says, oh, can you play such and such? If you half know it, you should play it. You should go, oh, I'm not sure about, oh, sorry, no, I'm not sure. You should go, oh, yeah, let's do that. And you make an act and you look enthusiastic with your other band members, even if you're going, oh, this is all going to end in a heap. Because it doesn't matter if it does end in a heap. The trying is actually, it's really important because that person who's asked you will feel quite valued and feel a bit sort of special that the band has taken the trouble to listen to them. Now, as I was saying, I've done gigs where there's no stage in a chain bar or restaurant or whatever, and you get hen parties coming. You get a hen party coming in. One of them will go, I'm a really good singer, and they'll shout in your ear while you're trying to sing a tune. And you just think, it's kind of, I want to go home now. And, oh, my mate's really good at Valerie, or can you do Mustang Sally? Yeah. We all know that we don't want those situations to arise. So, if you do the pubs where those sort of situations arise and you keep doing them, you've got to expect that that's going to continue. Not that somehow you'll be the top band that's well known, or you become the house band. You somehow become property of the pub, where you're expected to fill your diary up for 12 months. If you're filling your diary more than about 6 months ahead, that's a problem. That's an issue. You've got to take a bit of a risk there, because if you fill your diary up, it means that you're too cheap, or that you have no aspirations to chase other work. You just filling the diary up with 60 quid here, 60 quid there, oh, 75 that night, oh great. And before you know it, you're a slave to those sort of gigs. And what happens with that is that you then become hardened to it. You become disinterested. The band sounds tired. And if a band sounds tired, that's where you stay. You stay in that position. You don't get nice gigs out of it. There are a couple of bars that I play in where, drinks are, it's cocktails. So, you've got to have, if you want to go in a night out there, you've got to have a bit of dosh just to go, well, let's have some nice cocktails and maybe something to eat. Then you might get things like weddings and birthday parties and that sort of thing. But the moment somebody rings you up for a function gig, are you free on this particular date? You go, I'll just consult the calendar. You suddenly, you have to develop a little bit of a manner. Now, if you are free, what's your next question? You say, oh yes, we're free that night. The next question should be, whereabouts is it? Because it could be anywhere. Now, once you've worked out where it is, how long it's going to take to get there, whether you need to stay over, and travel costs and all that, you have to build it in to the overall price. If you say, oh, we're $750, but because it's 100 miles away, it's they're just going to look for somebody else, because you need to make it easy for them. You need to make it easy for them to give you a, yes, we'd like to book you on that same phone call. That's a really important thing. If it's, oh, we'll get back to you, oh yes, we're just looking at a couple of other options and we'll get back, it's not going to happen. So you need to build in the fee and you need to make it inclusive. You could say, oh well, yes, as it's within such and such, we can offer you a discount because it's not too far in the future. All those little tidbits, it could be utter lies, which it could be your policy. But the fact that you are offering, you're immediately giving them an opportunity to say, oh, sounds great, without selling yourself short. Don't say, oh, we're giving a 10% discount at the moment, da, da, da. The trouble is, with the more expensive gigs, people aren't really, especially with weddings, people tend not to count the money too much. Now, I know you shouldn't take advantage of that. You shouldn't rip people off, but you should get a fee that really makes it worth your while. But somebody who gets married might go to the bank and borrow £10,000, and the venue, the dress, the car, and the food, and the band, that sort of thing. People are expecting to spend money when it comes to a wedding. You should always bear that in mind. And also, and this might seem a bit weird, but if you charge more money, actually, you will be respected a bit more. So things like in your contracts, which you should always send out a contract for gigs. And it doesn't matter whether it's a pub that's 60 quid gig at a pub. I mean, it's up to you, really, with those. If it's a cancellation and you're not bothered, it doesn't matter. But if it's a wedding, I've done 2 now, where I've done more weddings, but on 2 occasions, I've had a phone call and the couple have split up. And that's, then you're struggling, oh, I'm really sorry about that. But in the contract, we state that before, with certain dates, a sort of gradation to the actual date itself, you say there's a cancellation fee. And I've never had both of those weddings, they actually paid in full because they had insurance, for example. So it's fine. You can get that. But you should remember that when wedding planners or couples getting married, they have wedding insurance, and there's all sorts of things that it'll pay out for. So don't sell yourself short with a wedding. If you quote for a wedding and they go, well, we can't, we were thinking, and they had a budget of X, what you could do is you could recommend somebody else. That would be a nice parting shot. But it's the parting shot where you think, I'm not doing this, I'm not going to do it, because it's a cheaper wedding. And if you are striving for the top end gigs, you've got to act like it. You've got to have all the promo in place. You've got to have people that say, well, where can we come and see you? If it's a pub, you've got to be very careful, because if it's a pub that's a bit rough, they're going to think, what are they doing in here? I thought they were a wedding band. your best option is to say we only do private work, but here's a YouTube link. Because then you are taking the onus off them for having to take the trouble to come and see you. So, that's okay, we've got a YouTube link of a wedding that we did. In the contract, you should always state that you reserve the right to make recordings. Of course, it's always good etiquette to ask the couple whether they wouldn't mind, but if in the contract, if you video weddings, it means you'll get more weddings. If you video yourself playing in a rank pub where people are hitting each other and there's shouting and booing and all that, you're not going to get anything but those sort of weddings where it's just horrible, nastiness. So, having gigged professionally for 25 years and, well, before that I was a kid, so doing occasional gigs, but still for money. So for 30 years, I've seen a lot of things and I've been able to hone my skill at being able to get gigs and to be able to say the right thing to make sure that you get the right ones.